This is the Modern Man Essentials Podcast. Tune in for content related to all things masculine in today's modern age and journeying in mental, spiritual, physical, and relational balance and growth. Here's your host, Jared Nordstrom.
All right. Welcome, everyone. We got Tom. Tom, what have you been up to?
Just getting some work done today. I'm gonna play around the golf tomorrow, so I'm just trying to get a little bit of stuff done. We have our grandson tomorrow afternoon through Saturday. So today's my last day of the week as far as work goes.
Nice.
Yeah.
And are you in the Twin Cities area right now?
Yes, we live downtown Minneapolis at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been reading some of your emails. Are you pretty masculous nowadays?
Say that again.
You pretty masculous nowadays?
Yeah, actually, I think early on there was one situation where I did wear a mask somewhere. I don't know if we went to a store or what it was, but have not worn one since then. That was back in March. So
Sure.
After we realized within the first month or so that this really wasn't as big a deal as the media would like us to believe, we've not been wearing them.
Cool. So that wasn't meant to be political. I try not to get too political on the podcast, but I don't want to be wishy-washy and not bog down or make what I believe prettier and more appealing to other people. But I bet your mustache could cover as a mask too.
Yeah, and some would say perhaps there's some politics to it, but I think if you just look at the science behind it, certainly in the beginning of the year, there was cause for alarm when we didn't really know what it was. But Vanessa, my wife, actually just read another update. There were like 40-some thousand college students that have tested positive for COVID, and out of those 40,000, the 2 have ended up in the hospital and 0 deaths. And there's a lot of people that have it, but it doesn't seem to be doing anywhere near the damage that it once did. And so the bigger concern is, people living in fear and not taking care of their mental and physical health because they're afraid of this virus and stuff. So I don't know that necessarily needs to be a political thing. Maybe it does follow along some political lines, but my choice to wear a mask, it just really comes down to the fact that I don't see the need for it. And I also, like I mentioned, we have our grandson 2 or 3 days every week, and I don't feel it's appropriate to be putting him in an environment where we're walking around wearing masks unless we absolutely have to. So anyway.
Yeah, totally. Lots of thought-provoking things in there. I work in the ER. I'm still an ER nurse, and so I get it. But so here's a great transition. So the way I got to know who Tom was I was in this health and wellness industry, thinking about like long-term health and doing things naturally, and it's pretty much predominantly dominated by women. And my wife was really into essential oils, and so that was an area of wellness that we explored, and I kind of felt like the man among the flocks of women. And a lot of people who know me know I've done bodybuilding and strength training for a long time. And, in the beginning, I thought, maybe plants are the greatest thing and I should get all my protein from it. But based on how I feel, I always questioned that for a while. And then I met Tom. I started reading some of his material, and he's kind of a free thinker among the health and wellness people. For some reason, I don't know if you can relate to this, Tom, but I kind of came from a background of the gym mentality, where everything was get bigger, get stronger, and then you can do whatever you want because you exercise. You eat however you want. You could deprive yourself of sleep as long as you want because you're healthy in this one area. The other end of the spectrum is the health and wellness, where I feel like I'm too, I don't know, I want to say masculine, where I like my meat too much. And I sometimes get dogged on like, oh, you're going to die because you eat meat, you get your protein from meat. But I like essential oils and I like supplements, but I don't know. Do you ever feel that way?
Well,
These are two kind of like diverse industries or
yeah,
thought
I mean,
processes.
so it's almost 20 years since I started as a personal trainer. I started in 2001, and
Mm-hmm.
the majority of personal trainers are in their 20s, maybe early 30s. And so where a lot of people will get their fitness information from is people that they see in the gym or in a fitness center that look the part, and they train all the time. And generally speaking, when you're younger, if there's ever a time in your life where you can get away eating whatever you want and just training hard and not getting enough sleep, you can do that when you're younger. And then the older that you get, the more that those choices start to compound on you and wreck your health. So you when people are getting all of their advice from really young fitness professionals, it doesn't mean that all of them think with that kind of short-sighted mentality, but
Mm-hmm.
that's more common than those that have been around it for a longer period of time. On the other side of things is the more of the plant-based and almost like touchy-feely kind of stuff that it is part of health and wellness, but can get a bit extreme as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so you had mentioned plant-based and versus meat eating, and then this is taking in a little bit of your question in a little bit of a different direction. But sometimes people say, I stopped eating meat, I just started eating plants, and I feel so much better. And one of the interesting things when you actually look into the science and the research and how your body responds to things is when you're deprived, when you're shorting yourself on protein or shorting yourself on calories, or you're just in a starvation state, which it doesn't mean you have to not be eating to be in a starvation state. You just have to be eating considerably less than you're going to be burning on a daily basis. In the
Mm-hmm.
short term, you actually feel really good because your body secretes endorphins to make you feel better when you're starving, because that motivates you to go and find food, or it did, when we think about humans thousands of years ago. So some of the stuff that gets passed around, you've got the 20-something bodybuilding meathead kind of advice, and then you've also got the, hey, I tried this for 10 minutes and I feel so much better. And the way that social media works, people will quickly share their enthusiasm for stuff that they haven't really had a long-term experience with. So
Mm-hmm.
That's just the nature of what we do. I guess when you ask the question, do I feel kind of like you described? I'm aware of what it is that you're describing. I don't personally feel that way because I tend to first look at what the science supports, what my experience has been over 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
what has worked and not worked with clients that I've worked with over that time, which is in the hundreds, the trainers that I've talked with and educated, which is in the thousands. And so you start assimilating all this information and sifting through the bunk information versus the facts and reality and what actually works. And anyway, I don't know that directly answers it, and I kind of meandered around a little bit, but
that's great, because me too, I'm in the research world as well. And, based on certain things, I've changed my mind on a lot of stuff. And when it comes to nutrition, is almost like religion to some people, where for me, I kind of go, okay, what is literature? What are studies? What are epidemiological versus controlled? Those types of things, what has worked in the past. And then when it comes down to the personal side of it, is like, how is your body responding? How am I feeling?
right.
And quality of life as well. That's a factor. And that's kind of how I got turned on to you, is because you were presenting these different ideas in kind of a different world, and I was able to personally relate. And that's kind of how I discovered Tom. And going into the math side of things, I'm really impressed with how you're able to say, here's the data, here's the evidence, let's just talk about it. When in today's world, people don't want to talk. It gets too personal,
Yeah.
and people start fighting.
Yeah.
And I there's nothing more I love than having a constructive conversation, even like a light debate, with somebody who isn't getting personal with you or feels like they're attacked, but it's intellectual.
Right.
And I feel like it's a lost art these days. Indeed, I don't know if you see that too, but anyways. So Tom, tell our audience a little bit about you. You kind of alluded to your health kind of journey, your profession. You're a personal trainer. You mentioned that. Mm-hmm. Tell us how you got there and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I guess going back to where it kind of all started. So I had leukemia when I was 5 years old and got treated at the Mayo Clinic. Fortunately, it was a few years after they discovered a cure for it. So I was able to get cured. But I spent years and years, actually all the way up until I was 18, going back to the Mayo Clinic for checkups and different tests and things. And so I got pretty intrigued with medicine at an early age. From there, I was ski jumping all through high school, and it was my junior year of high school. I got to go to Northern Michigan University, where there was an Olympic training center there for ski jumping, and that was kind of probably the peak of my skiing. It was between a couple of 4-year periods of Olympics and things, but that fall when school started, I had a coach who said, Tom, you could really do something with skiing, but you weigh too much. At the time I was like 5'10", which I am right now, 5'10", and I weighed at the time 157 pounds. And ski jumping, you have to be pretty thin, pretty light. There's a huge occurrence of anorexia in skiing because you have to be so light for ski jumping. So anyway, that fall I dropped from 157 down to 137 by trying to subsist on about 600 calories a day, and we did a ton of dry land training, and I got down to a weight that I felt was appropriate for ski jumping. I'm not recommending that for anyone, and it wasn't a psychological eating disorder kind of thing. It was just necessary to get down to where I needed to get down to. And I got burned out, as you might expect, from that sort of a diet and intense training, being away from home as a junior in high school. And that spring, I just kind of said, I said to myself, I didn't say it to my coach, but I'm like, I'm probably done with this. I'll go back home my senior year, jump one more year, and then go on to college and stuff. But that spring, I started doing weight training, because being at NMU, they had a nice facility for strength training. And I hadn't done it up to that point, mainly because I didn't want to add muscle and then add weight for skiing. And it was amazing how in a very short period of time, I started eating more and getting leaner because of what the strength training was doing. And so that really sparked my interest in the strength training. Went to school for exercise phys, and I ended up graduating with a pre-med biology degree. But the short summary there is then after college at St. Scholastica in Duluth, Minnesota, I started with Lifetime in 2001, October 1st of 2001 as a personal trainer. So from there, once I got going as a trainer, I would say that fitness professionals that start, there's half of them that are just focused on exercise and they don't care about nutrition, because at their young age, they can stay pretty lean, like we already talked about, eating whatever they want. The other half has a harder time with that. I'm of that other half, where if I'm not intentional about what I'm eating, I could gain body fat pretty easily. So nutrition was something that was super interesting to me, and I right away started implementing nutrition and supplements and stuff into my clients' programming. So as a fitness professional, I ended up growing at Lifetime which is where I was, to regional roles. And then eventually I took on the company's, I was a senior director and then eventually a vice president responsible for supplements, lab testing, metabolic testing, nutrition coaching, registered dietitian services, a whole bunch of stuff, that everything except exercise, basically. So through that time, I've had to not only rely on science, kind of like we talked about, and to back up whatever it is that I was recommending or teaching or suggesting, but also be able to prove it from personal experience and from experience with clients as well. What you find with nutrition science is there's a lot of stuff that might appear to be accurate when you look at research, and then it's not very applicable when it comes to real life. And then there's, at times there's stuff that's being recommended in real life that you do want to have a little bit of research to support it as well. So anyway, all of that led me to writing several hundred articles over the years, teaching, doing a ton of webinars, teaching trainers, and then, the average person as well. So that's that.
Nice. So what are you doing now?
So
besides writing?
Yeah, so in 2014, my wife Vanessa also got started with Young Living Essential Oils, and she built a very big business very quickly. And so I ended up at the time leaving Lifetime, and initially spent a lot of time helping her with developing some training and just managing the business. And then eventually she got her hands wrapped around it, her head wrapped around it, and I was kind of looking at the next thing for me. And so I started Vigor Training, which is my online training program. So I do have, for $29 a month, a subscription-based training program, which I know you're a part of as well, which is awesome. It's been awesome to see you in it. And, there's been other things that I've tinkered in the health and wellness space over that time as well. But as it stands today, blogging, writing, and then Vigor Training is what I've been doing.
That's awesome. I've been loving the Vigor Training. I did, there's a website that I used for a while, bodybuilding.com. I'm sure you're familiar with it because I saw a lot of supplements too. I used to do their programs, which wasn't bad, but there was something different about doing Vigor. A little bit more personalized, which is awesome. And you provide a community as well, where I kind of meet some other guys and gals too. Mostly it's guys in the strength program that I'm in, that I'm communicating with. But it's cool to have that community, a little bit of competition. I like how the app is able to match you up to see what the other guys are doing. And it also puts a little accountability into it. But honestly, what the game changer was for me, what I've been loving has been the warm-ups and like today's prep circuit for legs, or it was back. It was deadlifts today. And it makes a huge difference. And I think it's because too, as I'm getting older, I was pretty rough on my body, and there's joints that I know that I have to be careful of. And I can tell that addition to it really makes a big difference for me too.
Oh, that's good.
So,
yeah, it's interesting. Like what I have found, it's going on, I think next month, it'll be 3 years since I first started it. And like you mentioned, in the strength athlete, there's a lot of guys in there. And from my experience as a trainer, a lot of times women would be more willing to hire a trainer, a little more likely to ask for help and guidance. I think what has been appealing for the guys in the program is they have a program that they know they can follow. They just pull up the app. But at the same time, if you feel like you're just doing something all by yourself, your motivation doesn't last that long, even if the program works really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ability to do the same workout on the same day as other guys with like-minded interests or goals has been a powerful thing, to be able to communicate with each other, to share some feedback, and then to have some competition days as well. So this week, actually, because we started a new 12-week block, I took the leaderboard piece out of it so that people would just focus on understanding how these new training programs work. But they'll be back next week, so you can
Cool.
see how you stack up against the other guys in the group. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Being that I'm 44 now, I think when I hit 40, I started paying even more attention to what I was doing to support longevity and general health. And I've never been one of those kinds of trainers that walks around with their shirt off trying to show what's underneath it, sort of thing. But even more so today, when I look at the impact that strength and muscle mass has on longevity, I'm more passionate about the importance of strength training, even for middle-aged and older adults, than I was when I was younger. And it was more about looking good and having a six-pack, or some of the more aesthetic reasons that people get drawn into strength training when they're young.
Mm-hmm. I know, that's awesome. It's interesting how I think with strength training, there's still kind of a lot of stereotypes around it, where people don't think of it as a longevity tool, when it definitely is, which a lot of it, even with the pandemic and stuff, and talking about blood sugar control and insulin sensitivity, it's a great tool for that. I don't want to steal the spotlight from you, but the main reason I started this group, the Modern Man Essentials, is trying to get a holistic perspective on just kicking ass in life, physical, spiritual, mental. And I really wanted to have you on for the physical piece of it. Fall is my favorite time of the year because summer, there's a lot of weekend or activities going on, not just on the weekend, where we're out in the sun, doing a lot of stuff, vacations. I feel like fall is kind of that time where people start to settle down again. And as we do that, I think it's a great time to think about, any time's a great time, but I think there's a time this year where it's great to think about maybe starting your fitness routine, especially going into the winter. Vigor training's been awesome for everybody who's interested in listening. I'll put the link in the show notes. And you've got multiple programs. You got like starter level programs, strength athlete. You got a home workout program now too, as well. Is that right?
Yeah. In an ideal world, I always encourage people to get into a gym or a fitness center and do regular strength training, which includes barbells and dumbbells and plates and stuff. Obviously, with COVID, we've learned that that may not always be possible to be able to do that. So there are some home-based strength training programs that I've put together. But part of the reason, in addition to the equipment, that I feel the fitness centers or gyms are important, is just, again, the ability to be around other people that are pursuing the same thing, especially today when so much of our world revolves around what we're doing at home. We've got a lot of people are experiencing their kids having to do school from home. Maybe they're having to work from home more than ever. You had talked about earlier the value of the warm up or the prep work that's in the training program that I have. And, that alone, the reason that's so important today is because we are doing a lot more sitting, being in front of our screens, on keyboards, even more so than we were 6 months ago. So that kind of lifestyle, it causes reductions in mobility, of course, a reduction in strength. We're not getting in anywhere near the number of steps that we should be getting. So there's all this stuff that takes place. And if you can get outside of your home environment and go to a fitness center, go to a gym, go to a health club, if at all possible, I always recommend getting out and spending some time there.
That's awesome. So I see your passion with kind of the resistance training, strength training. So give me like the 10-minute speech of why that's important for health and longevity, not just for looking good, not that you have to get huge, that kind of stuff. Say versus if I'm going to pick, I'm not saying you can't do cardio, but I enjoy strength training a lot more than cardio.
Yeah.
What specific benefits do you get from resistance training specifically?
Well, I often will say muscle mass is your quality of life savings account. So the more muscle that you have when you reach old age, the longer you can continue doing the things that you like to do before your lack of muscle mass interferes with your ability to do them. So there's kind of two situations in life where we need to draw on the muscle, our skeletal muscle that we have. One is when we experience a disease. So I had mentioned I had cancer when I was 5. Now, as a 5-year-old, there's not much that a little kid like that is going to be able to do in terms of maximizing muscle mass. But the majority of people who do experience cancer are experiencing it as adults.
Kids have more resilience at that age for other reasons, though, too. So
yeah, absolutely. So when people experience cancer or other degenerative diseases, they often, as you know, will experience rapid loss of muscle. With cancer or heart disease, it's cachexia, but sarcopenia is just the known age-related muscle loss that so many people experience. So even if you're strength training throughout your whole life, you're still going to experience sarcopenia at some point. Like you're going to start losing muscle faster than you can build it or maintain it. And so the longer you can go hanging onto that muscle, the longer you'll be able to ward off the effects of aging, because once your skeletal muscle reaches a low point, you start losing muscle from other tissues as well. And so the idea with the strength training, the reason I feel like that is the foundation, is it helps you to have that base so that whatever life might throw at you, you're able to ward it off a little bit longer. Even something like here and now, that's COVID. I mean, if somebody did get a severe case of COVID-19, there's a good chance they're going to end up being far more sedentary. They're not going to be eating as much, and they're going to start losing muscle at a pretty rapid rate. Well, the more that you have at the beginning when that takes place, the longer you can continue without it being severely debilitating to you. So that's kind of the start of it, is an understanding that you can build cardiovascular capacity or cardiovascular conditioning through strength training. You can't build much muscle through doing long duration, lower intensity cardiovascular exercise. So that's why I steer people more toward strength than cardio. That doesn't mean that cardio doesn't have a place. If somebody wants to do an adventure race, or they've always wanted to do a triathlon or something like that, hey, great. That part of what life is all about is doing things that we enjoy and going after challenges that we haven't experienced before. But even in those cases, doing just enough endurance training to reach one's goals while conserving as much muscle tissue is still important. So that's sort of the longevity deal. There is getting to be more, especially I've seen it over the last 5 years, more research that points to the fact that the amount of muscle that you have as you're reaching old age is more a factor in longevity than the amount of body fat that you carry. So the gist of it is somebody can have a little extra body fat, and that's not as bad as not having enough muscle tissue. So, for men and women that are trying to get down to super lean levels of body fat because that's what an online trainer looks like or something like that, it might be fun, and you might enjoy that in the summertime when you don't have your shirt on and stuff, but it's not necessarily a healthy thing to be super lean. It is a healthy thing to have as much muscle as you can naturally build.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of reasons, my personal reasons. I mean, for me to stay strong, one, to keep up with my kids. When my kids get in sports, I want to be able to practice with them at home and keep up with them, to a certain extent, depending on what they choose to do. My job requires a lot of physical output for me, sometimes from moving people, and people are larger these days. So there's a lot of injuries in my line of work specifically.
Oh, I would imagine.
From that. And also another occupational hazard is I sometimes work with unstable mental people. Last week I got assaulted twice.
Oh,
but
wow.
I was able to hold my own, and not say that to be a buffhead or whatever, but it's just kind of the reality of what's happening now.
Right.
And also too, from the practical standpoint too, so a lot of mortality from the elderly comes from falls,
Right.
hip fractures specifically. And if you sustain a hip fracture at an older age, your chance for mortality within the next few years skyrockets. And a lot of times with old age, we see what you talked about, the muscle wasting, sarcopenia. And if you go into a fracture with already sarcopenia, probably brittle bones at that point, your chance for recovery and doing a decent rehab is hard. When you aren't able to do that, then you aren't able to function in life hardly at all. So that's one of my main motivations too, is you talked about your muscle is your life savings, basically. Yep. The more you can put into it now, the more you can reap in the future, depending on what happens to you in life. So.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and bone density and muscle mass often go hand in hand. I mean, if somebody's completely nutrient deprived of magnesium and vitamin D, K and calcium, which are critical for bone health, they're not going to be building any muscle either. They're not going to function right. And so if you can build muscle and maintain muscle, there's a great chance that your bones are going to be healthy as well. Taking bone supporting micronutrients and hoping that your bones stay dense and strong while you're sitting around not doing any kind of weight bearing exercise, it doesn't work that way. And so, when I get, and I would say that the conversation of bone density comes up more often with women only because they, according to the tests, tend to be more likely to have osteoporosis. When guys are tested at an older age, there's a growing percentage of them that are showing up with osteoporosis as well. So it's not necessarily a female thing. It's both males and females if they're not eating right and exercising appropriately. But I always caution them when they say, what supplements should I be taking to improve my bone density or to protect my bones? And, if you're not eating enough protein and you're not strength training, the protein, it does play a major role in bone health. The strength training is the stimulus that gives your body a reason to build dense bones, just like the strength training is the stimulus that tells your body to build more muscle. So strength training is a critical component for both those.
Absolutely. So you segued already into my next question. What's your macronutrient? Your favorite one that you read about all the time?
Yeah. So the first thing that I ever do when working with nutrition coaching client, personal training client, or making any kind of recommendations is steer people toward eating more protein for a variety of reasons. So a higher protein diet has consistently been shown to improve body composition, because when you eat more protein, you tend to be more satisfied. You fill up faster during a meal, but you also stay full longer after meals as well. Protein has a significant impact in helping to maintain normal blood sugar levels. So if somebody eats the same amount of carbs, but they're eating some protein with those carbs, it doesn't cause the rapid rise in blood sugar that's detrimental to our health. Higher protein diets actually enhance bone density. There's a myth that was going around for a lot of years because of the way protein is metabolized, that it would cause an increased excretion of minerals, and it can, but it also enhances the absorption of them. So a lot of times the increased absorption offsets any increase in excretion of those minerals. Of course, it's critical for lean body mass, even for people who aren't exercising. If they're eating more protein in their diet, that's important. And then as we age, we actually need to eat more protein and not less to get the same benefits from it. So one of the things, going back to the conversation of, for those that are over 40 or over 50 years old, we tend to lose some of our appetite as well. And we're just not as hungry as much. Because we're not as hungry, we tend not to eat as much. But the unfortunate thing is, for the same amount of protein where you're getting a maximal benefit as a 20-something, you have to eat a lot more as a 50 or 60-year-old. It's called anabolic resistance, where your body just doesn't respond to protein at the same level that it did when you were younger. So you have to eat more in order to gain those benefits. So there's been a lot of research probably over the last 10 years showing the efficacy of higher protein diets, trying to get like 0.8 to 1 gram per pound ideal body weight, as opposed to the 0.8 kilograms per pound. That's the recommended daily intake, which is enough to avoid starvation states for most people, but it isn't an optimal amount. So I could go on and on in protein. It's something that I'm really passionate about, but what's funny is if you look at the traffic to the articles and the way that people respond to articles and share them on my site, over the years, protein is one of those things that doesn't garner much enthusiasm. People don't share it too much. Those articles don't get read as often, and I believe it's one of the most important things in nutrition. Mm-hmm. But it's not as exciting or sexy or tasty as when you're thinking about foods with carbs and fat.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I know you've written a lot of articles on that. A lot of stuff that you've written. And again, people will put stuff in the show notes of where you can find Tom. What are you doing right now do you have any specific health and wellness goals right now? Anything different you're doing or experimenting with?
Right now, honestly, it's since beginning in March, when in Minnesota, like a lot of the rest of the country, I think it was March 16th when everything kind of got locked down. Most of my focus revolved around trying to just maintain what I had at the shutdown, maintain muscle mass, eat well, get enough exercise. And even, right now, I would say it's just trying to maintain. I wouldn't say that I'm doing anything, like I don't have any major goals or ambitions. We're looking at buying a new house and some moving and just personal stuff that I'm of the belief that there's only a certain amount of, I don't want to call it stress because not all this stuff is necessarily stress, but if you move, it's a stressor. Mm-hmm. The COVID thing is a stressor. The what's going on in the world right now, there is a lot of stress as we're recording this. Leading up to the election in the United States. Doesn't matter which side you're on. I mean, you're just there. It's just a fact that there's considerable amount of stress. And so my goal for myself and for the majority of the guys that I'm working with, or men and women that I'm working with in Vigor, it's just helping them to kind of get through this as healthfully as possible, maintain what they've got, make sure that they're getting enough sleep, taking care of themselves as best they can under the circumstances that they're faced with. And there's a lot of parents right now that are trying to figure out how do I stay healthy and fit when I gotta make sure that my kids are learning what they need to learn while they're doing this distance learning thing and trying to do video-based education. I mean, it's a different world than it was 6 months ago. So for me, I'm just trying to set an example for those that I work with on the basic things that we can control on any given day. One of those is getting in a workout. Another is, the food that we eat while we try to, brace ourselves for everything else that's going on. And that's one of the, usually when I'm signing off on an email, or in fitness, faith, and fortitude, Tom. And fortitude is one of those things that it's like this mental resilience and ability to just endure the stuff that's going on. We talked a lot about the like the physical health benefits of strength training during the time that we've been talking, but there is a mental health benefit that you gain from putting in the effort to go and lift something heavier each week than you dealt with the week before, dealing with a greater stressor than you dealt with the week before, so that what we do in the gym can influence our ability to handle stuff that goes on outside of the gym as well. So I rambled a bit on that, but I think, when you look at the world today and, the way things might be for the next few months, just simply maintaining where things are at and not putting our health at risk, I think is a step in the right direction for a lot of people.
Absolutely. There is totally a mental health benefit from weightlifting too. I'm trying to think about that more going into workouts, about how much of a mental challenge it can be sometimes, to believe in yourself. Oh, I can do this exercise, or I can finish this workout, or I can push this much weight. And I think it can be a good teaching, to like, if I can do this, I can do more. What more can I do in my life that I've been afraid of,
Right.
So I think there's a benefit from that as well.
Yeah, sometimes people, again, because we talked a little bit about Young Living, or just briefly about it, and part of the opportunity that Young Living provides is the ability to build a business. And when people start thinking about going into a business on their own, then they need to develop themselves, build business skills that leads them into personal development, and down this path where they're taking a look at themselves and saying, how could I be better? How could I do better? And I will, if someone asks me, hey, what's the best personal development book or course or something like that I should be doing, I'll usually say, well, are you working out with weights 3 or 4 times a week? And if you're not, that is it, because you don't feel like you have to go and do this textbook type of course to try to learn something. You're just taught it through the process of going and doing something you don't necessarily like to do on any given day, and push yourself through it. And that ability to overcome will allow you to handle any of the stressors you're going to face with work or with family or that other stuff. So I'll often say, well, weight training is the best personal development program out there. So.
No, I totally agree. What are you doing? This is kind of a closing question. What are you doing today to improve yourself as a man? Could be in any aspect of your life. What's something that you're trying to do to make yourself better?
So I think right now, and again, I should say that I'm trying, and I wouldn't say I'm always great at this, but I'm attempting to set a good example for our grandson in the choices that I make, the positions that I take on stuff, not because he understands it today, but so that in 10 years or 20 years, if he were to ever to say, hey, what was Grandpa Tom's take on all of this stuff that's going on, he would be proud of it. But right now, when he has the opportunity to learn some things from me or from Vanessa, I'm acting in a way that sets a good example for what we would hope he would become too. So that isn't necessarily saying, hey, I'm reading this book, or I'm doing this course, or I'm doing this thing. Right now, I feel like the level of development that I can take on personally while running the business and some of the other stuff that I have in place is just taking the time that I have his attention, and we're able to do things together and set the right kind of example for him. And that's why when we got into the masks thing, part of that isn't being a contrarian to say, I'm not going to wear a mask because I'm told to wear a mask. It's because I think of the world through his eyes today and what it could be in the next 20 years. And I'm constantly asking myself, what am I doing to try to make sure that when he does become a senior in high school, or he moves on to college, or a young adult, that I've at least made an attempt to influence the world in a way where, from my vantage point, the world will be what it should be for him. And I'm, it could be completely the opposite, but at least I'll have made the effort. So I realize that's not a direct answer necessarily, but it's kind of the way I've been thinking about things over the last several months.
I think that's a great answer. So being able to voice what you believe in a positive way, so that he could see that example, and maybe if he thinks something is wrong, he could take his stance on his belief too and not be afraid.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, man. Cool. Well, thanks again for being on the show with me.
Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
TomNikkola.com is probably the best place to start. So TomNikkola.com. And then you can find Vigor that we talked about, a bunch of articles and ebooks, and then like Facebook and Instagram, it's Tom Nikkola as well. So at Tom Nikkola.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for having us, and maybe another time, sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Jared.
All right, guys, that's all for today. Thanks again for tuning in for today's show. I hope you loved the content. If you did, please do me a favor and go to iTunes or whatever podcast platform you're listening to and give us a review. Also, consider sharing us with someone else that you think would enjoy this content. But until next time, be the best you that you can be and stay manly.